Hey, freshmen, welcome back to Bible 1. This is week 3 and day 1. Let me give you just a few announcements as you begin. First of all, I hope you had a great Easter. There is nothing like celebrating the fact that you and I have hope in the risen Lord. It's historically documented, biblically documented, and one of the proofs for me is I know that Christ lives in my heart. He's present in my life, and that is important for my faith. And in the middle of all this junk, this quarantine that you and I are experiencing right now, man, it's good to know that we have hope. And it's because of Jesus, because of his death, burial, and resurrection. And I'm so thankful for that. And I hope that even though it's different this year, I hope that you had a great celebration of Easter this time. Okay. Now look, let me give you some announcements. We're still in theology proper. We're still talking about who God is. This last week we did the greatness of God, and we saw some of those elements of how great he is and who he is and how powerful he is. He's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnitemporal. He is everywhere and all powerful, and we can rest assured in that. Now, this week we're going to talk about the goodness of God. The goodness of God. And I know there's a popular praise and worship song that revolves around the goodness of God. And so when we think about the goodness of God, I kind of want to give you a couple things to think of. Now today, there's a reading assignment for you. You're going to read out of Concise Theology, as well as there's an article I'm sharing with you. And that article is about the goodness of God and the reality of evil. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, but I want you to read that article. It's got some good stuff in it that's important for us because it's one of the most difficult topics for us to talk about. Our world wants answers, and it's hard sometimes for us to really give some answers because that's a difficult question. So read that article. Now there's a discussion board today that goes along with the article. Not necessarily asking you about the article, but asking you about the goodness of God and how we can remember the goodness of God in light of COVID-19 or the coronavirus. How do we say God is good and God is sovereign, and yet we're dealing with something like this today, okay? So you read the questions, discussion board, you know the deal there. You give your answer, a thoughtful answer. It ought to be more than one sentence. And then you read and respond to your classmates, okay, with a good, thoughtful answer. Not necessarily a paragraph, but a good, thoughtful answer, okay? You'll do that, and tomorrow there'll be another short video for you. Then after that, you've got a reading assignment that comes with a reading quiz, so you'll take care of that tomorrow. And then that'll be due on Friday. And then there'll be another video toward the end of the week. So just want to encourage you that this is a short week again, but it's a good time to talk about it, think about the goodness of God, and don't lose sight of that, okay? Now, let me talk to you about just a topic today called the sovereignty of God. Now, this kind of is a bridge from the greatness of God to the goodness of God. The care of God over his creation. You read last week about his providence, the fact that he has created the world and that he manages the world. He takes care of the world. He is active in the world to keep it running, to keep things going. And so that's talking about the providence of God. Now, this idea of sovereignty, I want you to think king. If there is a king who is a sovereign over a nation, that means that he is in control. What he says goes. You know, the people that live in the nation, the people that are his subjects, don't have a right or a voice to argue with him. He speaks, you listen, you obey his command. Okay? So when we think about the sovereignty of God, we're talking about God's control. You think about his greatness. He is creator. He has created this world. And as creator, he stands alone as God over it. That means what he says goes. Okay, so he is in control of our lives. And one thing for us as Christians, we can trust that when the world seems to be out of control, our God still is in control. And when you read the story of the Bible and you see the sovereignty of God, the Old Testament talks about how God used the Assyrians and he used the Babylonians to discipline the people of Israel. This wasn't some random king taking charge in Israel. He was ordained by God, who was in sovereign control. God's people didn't listen, and so therefore they had to suffer the consequences of that. And so God brought in the Babylonians, and he brought in the Assyrians, and he brought in the Medes and the Persians. And then on the flip side of that, he paved the way for good things to happen in our lives. We talked about that in Genesis with Abraham. When he lied to Abimelech, Abimelech could have had him killed. But God's sovereign control preserved Abraham. When God told Abraham to go up on that mountain and take Isaac, his son, and sacrifice him there, Abraham did exactly what his king told him because he trusted the king. And so when it got to that moment of completing the task, God speaks up and stops him because God's in control. And so you and I have to realize that he is in control. Now, where that becomes difficult is in a situation like this quarantine we're in, or when a loved one dies. I had a friend of mine several years ago went through a rough spot in his marriage and eventually divorced. And he and I talked every day for a while, and he had questions about, what God's designed for marriage. And we would talk about how God is sovereign, and he really struggled. If God is sovereign and he wants my marriage to work, why doesn't he just fix it? Now, we can't always answer the question why, but we have to trust that God is sovereign, God is in control, okay? And when bad situations come our way, he's still sovereign, he's still in control. And the Bible tells us this, that when those bad situations come our way, he will take those bad situations and make something good out of them. And so we just have to trust him in that. Okay, now there's a lot of other things we could talk about regarding sovereignty. You're going to read some of those things in your Concise Theology book today. Let me encourage you, if you have questions, you want to argue with the author of the book, shoot me an email. Let's discuss it. Let's iron some of those things out, okay? This is video 1, week 3. I'll be back with you soon for video 2, okay? Love you guys.